Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We're so excited to have you here today as part of the Washington Parenting Student Success Learning Series. We're thrilled to have over 120 registrants. Thanks so much for joining. Next slide, please. My name is Amy Magasos. I am with the Washington Student Achievement Council, and we started this learning series with an overview um, in February to kind of look at the broader picture of advancing parenting student success. And we followed with session one earlier this month on how data collection about parenting students can be used to improve experiences and success. Links to the previous sessions are in the chat and they're posted at the WASAC webpage. Today's webinar is the second in our spring learning series focused on what campuses can do to advance parenting student success. And then in May, we'll host our last session that will explore how communities can collaborate with campuses to advance success of parents, facilitating their access to post-secondary and their success. There's that third session. All right. Next slide, please. Before we continue with today, I want to recognize and thank our core collaborators that are partnering with the Washington Student Achievement Council for both this learning series and broader strategies to advance parenting student success in Washington. We have communities for our colleges with Xochitl Lopez, Gabby Fitz, and Fernando Mejia Ledesma. We have the Washington Campus Children's Center Coalition with leadership by Ann Slaughter of Pierce College and Casey Lalonde at the Evergreen State College. And we have the Washington State Board for Community and Technical Colleges with wonderful Jennifer Dellinger and her team there. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are new to this learning series, I'd like to provide a brief framing on why we're focusing on parenting student success. So WASAC represents all sectors of education in Washington and is really centered on advancing equitable post-secondary attainment through strategic efforts in affordability, enrollment, basic needs for students, and success and completion. Better understanding and supporting the needs and goals of the students who are parenting is part of that overall state goal of advancing equitable post-secondary attainment. And with the stats you see on the slide, from the Washington Student Experience Survey in 2024, statewide survey, you can see that approximately 1 in 5 students who are parenting are predominantly female, students of color, and more than half have low incomes and face disproportionate levels of food and housing insecurity. We also know from that survey that 3 in 4 of parenting students reported struggling to have affordable and available childcare. So these are highlighted in the brief that the Student Achievement Council has kind of laid as a first ground step. And last October, our core collaboration team co-hosted a strategy session with diverse cross-sector collaborators who identify key priorities and opportunities for Washington to advance support for parenting students. So you can see those priorities there on the right. It's really about making parenting students visible through data collection, which was the topic of our first session earlier this month, identifying and promoting strong campus strategies to support parenting student success, which is our topic today that we're diving into, and supporting development of strong community partnerships that can support parents' access and success in post-secondary. I want to highlight that the priorities developed last fall led to the development of a bill this past session, SB 6227. It really focused on creating recommendations for parenting student success through those priorities of data collection, campus practices, and community partnership support. While this bill didn't make it through our very fast session that just concluded, it really, I think, raises the banner of awareness around parenting student success and that parenting students really deserve the attention and support for our state, for their success, for their families, and for our communities. So, what's our opportunity now? We really see that it's important to commit ourselves to deepening our knowledge about these three priorities, building our network, which is part of what we're doing today with so many of you, engaging lots of partners across Washington campuses and in communities, agencies, nonprofits, and others who are focusing in on parenting success and using all of that learning and network toward building recommendations and support of the practices, policies, and partnerships that can create a better ecosystem for parenting students in Washington. So all of this leads to our learning today with our national experts from the Urban Institute, who have been working with campuses and states across the country to really advance learning and actions for student success. And so, with that, I'm going to pass the baton to our partners at the Urban Institute, Kate and Kimberly. Thanks so much for being with us and leading us today.
Thanks, Amy. We are so excited to be here with you all and to hear more about what you all are doing in your beautiful state. We had those couple webinars that Amy mentioned beforehand. The session one, you can find again the link in the chat. And so we're hoping to build off of that webinar in this, but you don't have to have seen that webinar in order to enjoy this one as well. So we are from the Urban Institute, which is a nonprofit primarily located in DC, but you are talking to people in Wisconsin and LA this morning. So we are part of a larger team that works on data to action. It's a project that started several years ago around legislation and student parent data collection. So Kimberly and I are a couple of representatives from the team, but colleagues Teresa Anderson, Nathan Sick, Ariella Meltzer, Afia Adu-Gayampi, and several others in our Texas group. We are really sharing a lot of their work as well too. So we didn't want to leave them out. So today we're going to talk about who student parents are in the national context, how they exist at the intersection of complex policy. So we'll give a visual diagram of the policies that student parents intersect with, and we'll use data to inform resources at colleges. We'll describe how that data is really connecting to some of these student parent resources. We'll have breakouts where we'll brainstorm existing resources, and then we'll have a poll about childcare, and we'll talk a little bit about childcare at the end. So parenting students, one thing that I wanted to say in the introduction that I missed is that Kimberly and I are both former parenting students, now recovering from education many years. My oldest son was always like, are you ever going to be done? Like, is it ever a thing? So eventually you'll get there. But I was a student parent through 3 degrees, Kimberly as well through some degrees. And so we are coming to you with that lived expertise, and then now as researchers at the Urban Institute. So we'll talk first about parenting students and review the national context. So the same national percentage number that Amy shared about Washington State is similar nationally, in that 18% of undergraduate community college students or students public colleges as well are parenting students, and that's 3.14 million students. So a really large population of people are parenting while in school. We did want to share that this is also a really huge transfer population. So student parents at baccalaureate institutions, 73%, so 3 out of every 4 have community or technical college experience. So they have transferred between institutions. So really thinking about student parents from the transfer lens also can change how you provide resources. If you want to find out additional information too, here is a QR code as well as a link to our Spark website, studentparentaction.org. There are a lot of data insights on there, resources. We have done the national estimates and reevaluated them using some national data. that we'll do when the next release comes as well. But about student parents and college attendance, we even have infographics by each or many different types of populations of student parents as well. So check that out, and if you want to learn a little bit more. Another thing is that parenting students are strong, but they do face completion gaps, right? Um, they One thing that is exciting and one thing that we talk about is that their GPAs are similar to non-parenting classmates. That is an important reason to include them in college, is that they have the ability. They're often just facing a lot of extra challenges. Only 17% of student parents complete a degree in 6 years, compared to 50% of non-parenting students. So they are 55% less likely to complete after controlling for other differences. And most are juggling work as well. So 73% had a non-work study job, averaging 36 hours per week is what they were working outside of school, and caregiving is an average across the nation for student parents. So when you think about the types of resources that student parents might need, these types of demographic information can really help you tailor the resources. And so that's one of our plugs for why collection on campuses is really important, and how they can inform the resources you provide for your student parents. So a couple of national policy context points. There is a growing number of states who are requiring student parent data collection for colleges, and there are states where data collection is being legislatively proposed in others. So we started at the Urban Institute with the Data to Action campaign for parenting students, and we started working with Oregon, California, and Illinois. And so for a couple of years, we've coached colleges around data collection around student parent for student parents, and also like what are resources on their campus. And so a lot of the information that we're sharing today comes from our experience coaching colleges and our experience helping them gather data about their student parents. So we started that first original cohort with those 3 states, and then we've just expanded. Our second cohort is in Texas. So we are coaching 13 colleges there. And after their legislation was passed. And then we just heard also about that Virginia recently passed, and we have it in pink here, although it is still waiting for the governor's signature. He has 13 more days, no pressure, to sign that bill. Also, with the policy landscape, we wanted to just give a quick dive into some of those legislative elements, because they also have additional pieces that are important for campuses to think about. So Oregon, for example, has 2 required questions in their legislation that include information not just about whether someone's a student parent, but includes things about household structure and child's age ranges. So in the previous webinar, we left a link, and it's on the Data to Action campaign website that Kimberly just put in chat, that talks about how we suggest asking these questions about student parents. Another important feature of several of the states, California, Minnesota, and Texas, have priority registration. So that means their students who are parents can register at the same time as other priority populations. So that might be people in athletics, that could be veterans. It depends on each state. Some of these are written so that if the state requires the priority registration for any population, then it must have student parents as well. But there are pros and cons to this approach with priority registration. Some campuses and colleges, so for example, a lot of the tribal colleges we work with have about 80% of their population are student parents. So priority registration for 80% of the population is not that helpful. And so just thinking about in what context this is or is more and less useful. California requires a website for student parents listing resources. And we had a star fellow, so we work with a lot of current student parents at Urban, and we pay them as consultants. And so Denise Mendez is at Berkeley, and she did a review of student parent websites in the state of California to see if they aligned with legislation about the legislative mandates for data collection that included this website requirement. And so you can find out more about her review there. But they have a lot of really great examples of great websites. California also requires a financial aid adjustment. So student parents are eligible for an increase in their cost of attendance for financial aid. They, in many states, have to request it on their own, and it is a process. But California requires a financial aid adjustment in their policy. Texas, in their legislation, banned discrimination against students due to pregnancy or parental status. Sounds amazing. Also scared a lot of faculty. So we just heard from faculty recently in Texas that they were a little terrified of, like, of this part of the legislation. Minnesota requires each college to have a student parent policy. And then Texas and Minnesota require institutions to have a student parent navigator or liaison on their campuses as well. I also wanted to make another comment about C Campus. So childcare access means parents in schools. This is a grant competition put out by the Department of Education previously. Now, I think it's Health and Human Services is going to possibly take it over this summer. But we just heard recently from our partners at New America that another competition is slated for this summer. So that is a program that funds childcare for student parents on campus, low-income student parents. So it's a really excellent source of income for your childcare centers. And now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Kimberly.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Salazar. As Kate mentioned, I'm calling in from Los Angeles, California, and I was a former student parent during my undergrad at community college, during my undergrad at UC Berkeley, and during some of my grad school at UCLA. I'm excited to be here with you all. And in this slide, in this section, we're going to be talking about how student parents exist at a complex policy intersection. And so, when we're thinking about how colleges were designed, we understand that they were designed for a traditional student. This traditional student typically sits on top of college access and success policies. Traditionally, they are dependent on their parents and on financial aid, for the most part, are considered dependents. They are young adults and they have to typically only navigate one policy system, the college system that was already designed with them in mind. And so now, fast forward, we know the students of today have intersectional identities. They are more likely to be, as noted earlier by my colleague Kate and by Amy, they're more likely to be students of color, women of color, first gen, veterans, and in this case, as we know from the updated overview of the student parent characteristics using 2020 data brief co-authored by Teresa Anderson and Kate and other collaborative partners at Child Trends and the Institute for Women's Policy Research. We know that nearly 1 in 5 student parents, also known as parenting students, we know that there are nearly, 1 in 5 student parents, also known as parenting students. We use those terms interchangeably, totaling over 3 million student parents, and we know that they're existing in intersecting identities. So not only are student parents interacting with college access and success policies like the traditional student was in showcased in the earlier slide, but they are also intersecting with this whole slew of other policies. I was one of the student parent leadership council advisors for when Teresa Anderson and Autumn Green were designing this student parents at the center framework. And I remembered clearly at the time it was during COVID. I was doing remote learning. Child centers were closed. I had my daughter with me. Frankly, I had no idea what I was getting into becoming a parent advisor for this leadership board for this student parents at the framework to inform it. But I remember feeling exactly as overwhelmed as this picture shows that we are because of all of the intersecting policies, systems, institutions that we engage in. I think it was heightened because of the fact that it was COVID, but I remember feeling so seen and feeling like, oh, someone finally gets it. This is a framework that fits my life and speaks exactly to my experience as a student parent navigating TANF, navigating SNAP, navigating WIC, now navigating being a teacher on top of being a student because childcare centers were closed. And so, so many student parents are working in also situational systems. They are facing child custody battles and also foster care systems. There's layers on top of layers that make life just complicated when you're trying to not only navigate parenthood, but on top of that, navigating external systems that you navigate as a family and also navigating college. And so in the next slide, we see the same graphic, but nicer. You see that the student parents are at the center, and then we have a group that personal things that they're facing, group systems that are facing, and life situations that they're facing. And so in the next slide, that's when it just this framework works so well to show just how overwhelmed and how many things student parents are juggling because here are 81 bullet points that provide examples of the different systems and policy student parents have to navigate. And so again, I'll never forget seeing this framework and thinking, this is what my mind looks like in my stats class when I'm sitting there thinking, I have my WIC appointment right after. I have to wait. Do I have enough formula? Like, this list of to-dos is what it felt like I was navigating mentally. Well, I also had to be focused, thinking about, okay, wait, what did he just say about that statistics? I feel like that's going to be important. So they, have a lack of not only bandwidth, but time poverty. So they're bouncing around amongst all of these tiny items inside this circle, inside the center, and simultaneously trying to maintain jobs, family, schooling, the endless dishes. What's up with the dishes? That to me, you become a parent and you just never leave the kitchen. It's wild. So, for more information on the student parent families at the center framework, there's the QR code, but also we're going to drop the link in the chat. The student parent families at the center framework is intended to provide a comprehensive map of the intersecting systems affecting student parents and family and the program and issues within each. So, why did I introduce this framework? This framework, with this framework in mind, what does support then look like in practice? So, when we're putting data to work, when we're thinking about the data collection piece of student parent uh, uh, the data collection piece at universities when colleges are trying to get a better understanding of how to better serve their students. We understand that data makes kind of student parents visible, but supports make it possible. Part of the Data to Action campaign, we understand that two things need to occur at once and that there are low-hanging fruit supportive service things that can be met before waiting kind of that longer period of having to collect the data, analyze the data, clean the data, and figure out, that plan. And so each iteration of this cycle sharpens the next. When we invest in data, we strengthen supports. And with stronger supports, we improve college outcomes, which is one of the big goals of college, which is retention, graduation, and enrollment. And so better outcomes generate smarter data, and then the cycle continues. And so when we're thinking about what student supports look like, as we're thinking about, okay, as we strengthen student supports while we also collect the data to help both reach our college goals of enrollment, graduation, and retention, we have to think about what student parent supports look like. This also means supporting their experience in the classroom and supporting the faculty they engage with. At the core of the college experience for any student is our engagement with faculty. And so when we think about supporting student parents, we have to think about providing supports to the faculty to support student parents. And colleges have done this in our Data to Action 1.0. We had two colleges that understood the importance of winning over faculty, but also training faculty to better understand this population. And so Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in California partnered with Student Parents with Dependents program to create a syllabus language that faculty could easily incorporate into their syllabus. In the chat, there's a link to the example language, which is really faculty found really helpful to better inform or help their student parents feel seen in their classroom and provide basic needs supports and a slew of supports for student parents weaved into their syllabus. And so Bakersfield Community College also understood the importance of investing in faculty. So during a professional development week, the team that was part of Data to Action hosted faculty workshop where they presented preliminary findings of the student parent data that they were collecting to host workshops, presentations, and provide practical guidance to the faculty that were at the professional development week to better understand, again, this student population and what their needs are. And so, another part of what student parent supports look like in practice is addressing policies. So, another top down approach is the power of leadership buy in in addressing policies. This quote is from Long Beach City College President Mike Munoz, who was a student father and a solo parent while in college. So, when he became president at Long Beach City College, he realized through his lived expertise how hostile the institution was for families. And so he aimed to change that by addressing, like in this quote states, the stroller posters and removing the no children allowed. In their college had these posters in red that had like a big stroller and like a slash mark on it. And very vital like buildings such as academic student support service buildings and various buildings on campus that students need to enter to be able to make an appointment with their college counselor, to be able to go to the financial aid office. And so he removed all of those posters and essentially had a training with staff so that they better understand why he's removing them and how hostile this can be for a student father or student mother navigating this institution. So in the next slide, we see also what student supports look like in practice. We talk a lot about culture, and in this component of culture, we understand that childcare is a big lift. I think it's hard sometimes to just say, yeah, something that you have to implement is childcare. And you're like, that is a huge task and ask. And so we wanted to provide this example of a creative way that is something that a lot of K through 12 families face when they're navigating college and how calendars don't align with K through 12 systems and college breaks. And so Mount Wachusett Community College attempted to fill that gap by providing child care support. It's basically a 1 to 2 hour drop-in center that the Student Parent Center program hosted. And so the staff would watch over the children for 1 to 2 hours, and they would provide movies, provide snacks, and it was supervised. And it was as easy as leaving your contact information and just so that when the 1 to 2 hours was over, you can come pick up. Or should an emergency arise, you're still physically on campus, but you can get some studying done and some reading done while your kids are off on break, but you're still in school. And so I'll go ahead and drop a link in the chat to so that you can see the example and learn more from what they accomplished there. The next is basic needs. So we know student parents, aside from struggling with time poverty, also struggling with accessing basic needs. But again, sometimes basic needs feels like this big amorphous thing that we understand has multiple layers to it. Here's an example of how the University of Riverside, UC Riverside is attempting to approach basic needs. This is a very unique example because in their basic needs website, they set aside a separate programming both in their web page but also in the services they provide that centers and addresses a two-generational approach. So they have a website dedicated to student parents within the Basic Needs Center that provides resources such as the child tax credit, WIC, SNAP, diaper bank, which is really great because what I found during my time at in college was that sometimes at the Basic Needs Center, they would understand meeting my need, but they didn't understand how to meet my daughter's need. And so at UC Berkeley, you're able to both at the food bank uh, get food for both you and your dependents. They also had a very two-generational approach model. Any hot foods, even though it was like solo for if you didn't have dependents, but you were able to then get hot foods if you more hot foods if you had dependents. They still struggled with understanding childcare under their emergency grants because they didn't understand that as a emergency. But I know that there's a lot of work being done to open the umbrella of what's considered a basic need for a student as they're navigating college. So in the next slide, some universities provide holistic supports, such as understanding that stress that comes with being a student can impede on your parenting, and then the stress that comes with being a parent can impede your studies. So SD Mesa hosts student parent healing circles, which are typically led by student parents, although the university does provide a space, does provide food, does provide tangible support so that the student parent can lead the healing circle for other student parents. And UC Davis provides prepared meals, nutrition, cooking workshops, and supervised child activities, as well as fitness classes to help families feel centered and balanced in family and academic life. So going back to basic needs, we can't discuss basic needs without discussing housing. And I also don't want to sit here and tell you, oh yeah, just build a whole family housing center at your university as if that's just, one task to check off and it's easy peasy because we understand that that's a longer term investment. But there are some institutions, some universities like there we won't have to reinvent a wheel because there are universities that already have family housing and typically they're off campus. So Cal State Northridge and University of Michigan and Jackson College provide what is typically off campus family housing. The neat feature, I was also a my daughter and I also were in family housing at UC Berkeley, and the really neat feature is the housing provides playgrounds, open spaces, and relatively affordable housing. UC Berkeley and UCLA provide very competitive market rates, with UC Berkeley providing priority registration for single parent families and families with children with disabilities. We also have cohort models in the next slide that provide designed communities and networking opportunities. They serve as a mechanism to ensure systemic and policy failures aren't internalized and thus perpetuating shame. So when you see that you're not the only one struggling within this cohort model, you understand it as a systemic and policy failure versus a personal one. At UCLA, the student parent Cherry Lay founded the Summer Transfer Experience. Um, where I also was a recipient of this cohort model. Actually, it was because of this Cherry Lay's finding the summer transfer experience, and I attended that I actually even knew what UC Berkeley was. The counselor there told me, well, if you're already applying to UCLA and you have a 3.89 GPA, you might as well toggle Berkeley. And I just said, okay, I don't really know what I'm doing. I was admitted on a full ride and I graduated summa cum laude. So I'm a product of these cohorts working. Um, and so in the next slide, we see um, uh, creative ways that colleges are partnering with nonprofits to provide family housing. We have two examples here. We have um, Raise the Bar, which partnered with colleges like Long Beach City College and are also themselves as a nonprofit building housing for single student parents that are navigating college while also being in the LA area and one other state that they support that I don't have off the top of my head. And then we have Buckner Family Pathways, which is a nonprofit in Texas that also provides housing support for Texans, single mothers that are navigating school. So we don't want to say, oh, yeah, tackle housing without also providing examples of creative ways that colleges have leaned on nonprofits to address kind of the housing crisis that student parents face. So, as I state all these supports, I wanted to provide a critical implementation consideration. So, while these student parent supports offer a strong starting point, implementation must be intentional and iterative. It must center the student voice. It must ensure supports are informed by lived experiences, not just assumptions. And as you're collecting the data, it's important to evaluate these supports against your data, regularly assessing whether student parents are actually having their needs met. And in we understand that we want to balance urgency with reality. We recognize many institutions are in the implementation phase. This work takes time. We will be your biggest cheerleaders, we promise, and it's important to leverage what already exists. With this resource of existing resource tool that we're going to be sharing in just a minute, this tool is intended to help you adapt your approaches to your campus context, build and strengthen partnerships, evaluate existing supports, and identify and address gaps. So, supporting student parents requires a shared institutional commitment, one that relieves students from sustaining us essential resources on their own, and recognizing that them as a significant population colleges are responsible for serving. So, with that, I will go ahead and pass it over to my colleague Kate to provide examples of College Spotlight.
Thanks, y'all. I am going to focus on using data to inform resources at colleges. So some examples from a couple of colleges, and then keep in mind we're going to head to the breakouts. But I really appreciate Kimberly for laying the groundwork for what does this context look like? What are all the things on student parents' minds? And then we wanted to connect it back to data. So a lot of our work has been around data collection and how it can be used to really inform which resources are most helpful for which student parents at which colleges. And so we have a couple of examples of our data to action cohort. So this was one institution, California State University Channel Islands, CSUCI. They actually were able to braid different sources of data. So FAFSA, when it was still a lot better. And then they looked at a survey they had, as well as their student information system pulled it from different areas to get one number. And they took that one number of student parents, and they looked at which services on campus they were more or less likely to use. So in the red, you'll see students with dependents, and on the gray, you'll see students with no dependents. So in the red, you can see that there were no services used. For students with dependents, that rate of no services used was 42% compared to 30%. What we know from national data is that student parents tend to have more basic needs than others. So that led them to really consider, like, what is the gap here, right? So student parents are likely to have more basic needs, but they're not using as many of our services. So on-campus housing, for example, 16% of students with no dependents versus 3% of students with dependents. That might be infrastructure, things like that. But it could allow them to ask, like, is this something we should provide? What is the need? Using even just the food pantry, student parents were less likely to use that as well. So this gives an example of like what data can show you, and then you can use some qualitative feedback as well to understand how student parents really think about the details of that specific resource. This is another example that we wanted to share about Bakersfield College. So they did a survey and got really great response rates from their student parents, and actually compared it. They did a survey that compared student parents and students who were not parents. So they had a comparison in their survey, which was amazing. So they could understand, like, they asked questions of student parents about like age groups of the children that they had, number of dependents that they had, whether the children had special needs. And so this type of information could really help guide colleges to understand like what are the resources our student parents need based on what does the data show about them. And so we wanted to jump into our breakout. So we have an exercise called the profile of existing resources. So to kind of recap where we've been, we talked about that large framework of all the systems that student parents intersect with. Kimberly gave some examples of really great student parent supports, with the asterisk that you all are not all powerful beings and cannot single-handedly fund some of these things and do all the work to get a lot of these things in place. But what we do know is that we can use tools like this profile of existing resources exercise to understand what is available at your campus or at a college you have been to. So this is adapted from the Family Friendly Campus Toolkit, which is about to be re-released with on the SPARC website, Student Parent Action Through Research Knowledge. Teresa Anderson has been working, our colleague has been working closely with Elizabeth Oshie at Perg Learning, who was originally an author of the toolkit. And so they're doing a new version of it. So it'll be out hopefully this summer, hopefully soon, actually in the next couple months. But this is one example of a type of resource that is is part of the Family Friendly Campus Toolkit. So this resource profile is intended to catalog all the resources available to students. You can also note resources that are already planned for the near future using this. So we're not going to have you go through the whole resource list because that seems cruel and unusual for this amount of time. But because these are the 10 different categories, we're going to focus on the top 3. So colleges and services or facilities on campus targeted for parenting students, college services and facilities on campus that are not targeted for parenting students, but that are used by them. And then community or public services off campus that are often used by parenting students. So work on that.
Thanks, Kate. So I wanted to invite two brave souls to volunteer to share out any major reflection moments that they have. Were there any themes or patterns that you see come up? Did you notice any gaps come up? Were there any big aha moments? This can also be as simple as uh, I'm curious to hear about also maybe even a personal reflection. I saw a lot of people discussing about how they aren't parents and they are new to the student parent ecosystem. We don't always have to have that lived expertise or that lived experience. We know in the US, we're typically not a family friendly or even child centered society. And so it was great to see people have their wheels turning with given the examples that we provided that even though some of their programs, policies, or supports aren't targeted towards or marketed for student parents, that they exist in those program and policies. And so they were making the connection. So I'm going to give just a couple minutes if someone would like to unmute and provide an aha moment or something they learned in these group discussions. One brave soul.
Oh, fine. Um, um, we had a good talk about some different things we're working on, but just kind of reflecting on what we saw. There are fewer built supports specifically for parents than there are accidental supports for parents. And so we were talking about a few different things and kind of just at the end there, we had started talking about things colleges used to have. And one of the things, Walla Walla used to have a parent-child center. And it got me thinking about how Eastern used to have family housing. And very recently that has come up to be a problem because we have some students on campus who are being forced to leave housing because of their because of a forthcoming child because our housing policy states that children can't live in the dorms or in student housing. And so there are just some real equity issues with the decline of spaces like um, a parent-child center or family housing and things like that, and kind of looking at how we can build those back up.
Thanks so much, Emily. We have a couple more seconds left for another brave soul. I'm making eye contact with some people. Pressure, pressure, pressure to share. I've heard great discussions in multiple rooms. This is such a perfect opportunity for you all to learn from each other. Again, I saw so many of those aha moments, so I will um, leave that silence. Oh, Melissa, I see you
Yeah.
unmuted. Yes, please share.
I just want to share that I think if I heard you mention earlier, but if folks didn't really register that there's a C Campus grant available, us having access to that on our campus has really enriched the targeted services that we can offer. We have a wonderful person in a part-time role working that, and has really helped facilitate a lot of great targeted services for potential students who are parenting and current students who are parenting, like helping us facilitate childcare drop off during events, which is huge. And I'm not a parenting a person, but seeing those services being added is really just touch something in me to know that parents can get support, get a break so they can study while their kids are safe and being taken care of. So, yay for C Campus. Apply for it if you don't have it.
Thank you so much to the two brave souls, Emily and Melissa. We appreciate you both sharing out. Um, my colleague Kate will share screen. And in the chat, we provided the link for the profile of existing resources. If you want to continue documenting at your specific college, the link is now dropped in the chat. Please let us know if the links are broken. Let us know in the chat if, as you're copying and pasting and testing the link out, if it's not working. Um, and so in the next slide, we're gonna um, discuss what concrete actions can you take colleges, examples that colleges have used the profile of existing resources tool to identify gaps and find new opportunities. So, one school found that their website had incorrect instructions for where lactation rooms actually were located. We find that a lot of the tools, as Emily noted earlier, are maybe pre-existing or they were there once, but they weren't maintained, and a lot of the links are broken, a lot of the instructions are incorrect, a lot of the phone numbers are outdated. I remember as I was transitioning out from UC Berkeley into the real world and having to find housing, I got a list of resources for housing and I called and it says, ding, 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 the person you're trying to call. And I was just broke down in tears because it was just navigating broken links and incorrect phone numbers. So it's good to go back to revisit the websites that you do have to ensure that the items there are still intact. One school did a full assessment of local childcare availability. Another school is preparing a cheat sheet version of their profile to live on their website and could be printed and shared with students. Through the tool, many identified links to resources that were buried on web pages and hard to see and navigate. A school found a local organization that assists with educational goal setting, registering for classes, applying for financial aid, etc. And the college will be reaching out to explore a partnership. Next slide. So I'm going to hand it off over to my colleague Kate, and she's going to do a deep dive into one resource, which is childcare.
Thanks, y'all. We have a childcare project we're working on in Oregon State. And so I'll share a little bit more about that at the end of this, but we really wanted to test your technology skills and try one more thing with a few questions. So you will go to the link that we'll put in chat shortly, and you will click on the basically answer these questions as we go through them. So they should pop up for you once you go to the link. I'm sorry, that is not a link. That's just a Might have to copy that and put that into your chat. But we're going to ask you to connect there and then answer the question about what types of colleges for children are offered at your Washington-based college. So you should be able to check multiple of these. So you could check on-campus childcare, you could check drop-in care if you have that, after-school care, Head Start. So we're seeing some live poll responses, and we'll wait a few more minutes. Seconds, sorry, minutes, but we wanted to kind of just take a pulse to see which of these exist in the groups we're talking to today, to try to kind of understand what childcare looks like in Washington in general. All right, a couple more responses maybe, but it looks like on-campus childcare is the leader for sure. And then off-campus childcare centers, also where there maybe is a partnership, is also pretty high. And then school day off or summer camps, that's amazing. All right, we're going to jump to the next question. What ages of children are served by your college or a formal childcare partner of the college that you're at? Cool. Lots of babies and toddlers. In the high school, that's awesome. Yeah, toddlers and preschools are the second two highest. Interesting, no elementary or middle school, which to me would indicate possibly no after school care. And then we have one final question about what do you think are barriers to offering more childcare resources for student parents? There's a theme there, funding and cost. Staffing, funding. Needing a new building. Administration, lack of prioritization. Yeah. So to recap, thanks y'all. We had high numbers of on-campus or off-campus childcare centers. There was one after school care. A couple of people with, there are a few people with camps, some Head Start, that's exciting. And then we had a lot of babies or toddlers being supported. And then lots of cost and funding barriers, staffing barriers, powerful advocate. That's awesome. So I'm going to share a little bit about, so the project I had mentioned, we are doing a toolkit about colleges in Oregon State. And so the toolkit is meant to be a tool for colleges to really assess kind of what are all of our options for childcare and what are all the ways people are funding it and what are some of the barriers like buy-in that you all mentioned or staffing or some of the legalities of it. liability. So we'll talk about that in the toolkit. But these are some preliminary findings. We did some interviews with stakeholders across the US and are focusing on working with some of the organizing group of the child care campus centers. So it was formerly called HEALPO and is now an affiliate with NACCE. But one of the few things that we're kind of finding is that there's more buy-in from leadership if childcare offerings are part of an educational pathway for ECE programs. So that was something that was kind of a new insight to us, where a lot of people could not get buy-in from leadership unless they were able to say this aligns with the vision of our institution, that we are teaching students, it's part of an educational pathway. And then there was basically we've been kind of documenting all the funding sources and structures for funding. And these are often very context specific is what we're finding. So legislature supported funding in Oregon. There's a state payroll tax in Vermont. But there are really many funding sources. And so many people are breeding those funding sources. And there are some intricacies as well. So there's one Oregon-based subsidy that the Child Care Center has on campus. Students apply for that subsidy and it's paid for by student fees. And then they receive a check to use for childcare for however they want. So while it is like college funded, the way they went about it is that the students have the choice as to how they want to spend the money. Again, what the third bullet point is what we just y'all had identified. Staffing models are crucial to consider, but including students is helpful. So some ways we've seen this done are ECE program students or work study students. Teach America, AmeriCorps, some of those other programs as well are options for students. And so the toolkit is coming this fall. So keep an eye out on the Spark page, Student Parent Action, which Kimberly will talk about here shortly. I did want to say one more thing too. So the opportunity, and I wanted to focus on childcare in this webinar in particular because from the first webinar, we had a survey at the end, which we'll share the survey link for you all for this webinar as well. But we really wanted to link student parent data to childcare. There are not a lot of states or institutions who are doing this yet. So, how are students using childcare to really get to that retention, graduation metric that so many colleges are trying to achieve? That piece of data is really, really valuable. And we hear from students all the time, I need childcare, but we don't know what forms of childcare are most helpful and for what types of students and in what context. So there's a really great opportunity in Washington State to connect your any data collection that you all do to childcare. So the couple questions here about like how can it further support childcare offerings, but then also who is already connecting data about student parents to childcare? Is it quantitative? Is it qualitative? So that's just a really exciting opportunity in Washington State. Now I'll pass it over to Kimberly.
Thanks so much, Kate. So we want to close out by pointing you to two resources that can support your continued work on parenting student parent success. And so on the next slide, the second resource on the right is a Data to Action campaign link, which is a link that I shared earlier in the chat, but we'll go ahead and drop it into the chat momentarily. This is the campaign that was actually first initially influenced by Michaela Martin, which is a student parent herself. Speaking of childcare, trying to access childcare at a community college in Oregon. They said there's a 2-year wait for a 2-year community college program. So she passed legislation in her state to collect data on student parents, which then later along with Teresa Anderson, Autumn Green, and Kate Westerby and other partners, became Data to Action campaign for parenting students that we have a 1.0 and 2.0 model across different colleges across the nation. And then we have the Spark Collaborative. So the Spark Collaborative is a national network dedicated to advancing student parent success in higher education. It brings together campuses, researchers, advocates, and funders to share promising practices, build community, and drive systemic change for parenting students. You can explore the network, access resources, become a member, it's free, and also subscribe to our newsletter, which is great. And that's not just because I helped create it, and connect with peers across the field. We'll also drop that link in the chat. Both of these resources are designed to meet you where you are, whether you're just starting to build an infrastructure for student parents or looking to deepen your work. Oh, thank you, Kate. She dropped the links in the chat. And also, don't leave just yet because we would love to hear from you on how much you enjoyed this webinar. In the chat, we're going to go ahead and share a tiny URL link for you to share your feedback and support requests. So as we end, please complete the survey and share how we can further support you in this work. I will drop the link in the chat. And then I will go ahead and hand it over to Amy to close us out.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. Thank you, Kate. We are so grateful to you and the Urban Institute for giving these excellent frameworks and great examples from around the country. Thank you to all of you out there in our group today for participating actively, and we're just really excited to continue engaging with you. I am putting in the chat some contact information. If you would like to share more about your campus practices and perspectives, get involved in our growing network, please reach out to me and to the core collaborators. We would love to talk with you and learn more about what you're doing and how we can advance this work in Washington. Finally, we hope that you'll join us for the third and final session of this learning series. It's going to be on community partners supporting parenting student success. It'll be May 5th at 10 a.m. And thanks for putting, we'll have the registration link in the chat. We'll also be in your email inbox with the webinar wrap-up materials and the invitation to the third session. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and we really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.